From the summer of 2012 to around the fall of the same year, I conducted oral narratives of the Filipino community in Annapolis, so descendant communities of families who have been there for over 50 years, as well as the current community of recent immigrations after 1965. The main basis of that research is to document this history that is mostly unknown and not talked about, and as well as to pinpoint places where we can perhaps conduct archaeological research in the future with archaeology in Annapolis. I was originally pulled into University of Maryland's Department of Anthropology program, their Master's in Applied Anthropology program, because of my interest in Dr. Marcoleone's Archaeology in Annapolis project and his statement of, I guess, expressing his interest in pursuing a more Filipino historical direction. I really liked how archaeology in Annapolis really makes the point to incorporate the community in their research and to educate the public. I feel that as an archaeologist and as a professional, it's really important to make your research and work relevant and accessible to the larger community as a whole and not just to academics. The Filipino history in Annapolis, to me, it's really interesting because you have some exposure of Filipino history in the West Coast, but you don't really have any on the East Coast. No one really knows about Filipino history in the East Coast. For a community that has lived there for over a century, or mostly a century, no one talks about them. No one knows what they did, who they were, and to me, that's a problem. And so this research is really, it's breaking boundaries. It's breaking new ground because this is something that no one has done. And the community that lives there, they didn't even know that people cared about them. They didn't know that people cared about their history. And finally, archaeology in Annapolis is giving them that identification and recognition that they not only want, but they deserve. Despite years of hardship and discrimination for a lot of these Filipino pioneers, whether they were from the U.S. Navy or they were health workers, they really overcame a lot and really gave up a lot in order to provide a new life for their family. They made a lot of sacrifices that I can't even imagine a lot of people would really be able to do or be able to accomplish in order to really succeed. Filipino history is American history because of the over a century relationship that Philippines and the U.S. has had. From Philippines being an American territory from 1898 to 1946, and until now, Philippines continuing to be a political ally. In the early 1900s, blue-collar workers were coming here as agricultural workers in the West Coast, and in the East Coast as U.S. naval men, as well as servicemen in the capital, as well as in New York. Addressing labor needs. Decades later, it's the same story, except now it's white-collared professionals. Now it's nurses, doctors, other health professionals, but it's still the same story of not being recognized as one of the largest immigrant populations in the U.S. And so I think that there is a problem in that there is no given identification for this large immigrant group, and they are, in a sense, invisible in American history when they should not be. I'm Filipino-American, and to me, this history is in some sense, it's of course academically invigorating because it's new research. But at the same time, it has a personal chord with me because my parents immigrated here in the 1980s as part of this new wave of immigrants that were white-collar workers from the Philippines. So this strikes a very personal chord with me.